This is SITREP, the podcast on Philippine affairs and Filipino interests. I'm Ivan at home from Manila. The last 3 weeks has been a real roller coaster ride of political excitement and emotions here in the Philippines, with the recent arrest and surrender of former President Rodrigo Duterte seemingly opening up a new chapter in this country's continuing political drama. The House continued its hearing on fake news and disinformation from pro China and pro Duterte social media personalities. The Senate is seemingly questioning the legality of Duterte's arrests. There's talks of another revolution in the air, of another possible coup coming this week, and of course, there's always the heaping dose of religion and family political drama. With us to help make sense of the current Philippine political climate, we have with us political blogger and commentator The Cocky Rocky. Rocky is a well respected communication strategist and international educator based in Manila with a large social media presence and articles published on online outlets like the Huffington Post. Cocky Rocky, welcome to SITREP.
Thank you for having me, Ivan.
All right, sir. So perhaps we can start the podcast by asking you to tell something about yourself. I mean, everyone knows your blog. We've been following it. People have been following it since the start of the Duterte administration. So perhaps you can tell us what got that started and what really got you to Philippines.
Well, Philippine politics sort of happened to me. It was not really something I sought out. I've always been a writer. My core competency is actually communication, specifically in English and Filipino. In fact, my training is in classical English literature. Actually, not just English literature, but world literature. So writing comes very easily or naturally to me, most specifically essays. But I do dabble a little into poetry, songwriting, playwriting, and the like. I initially began my blogging for for personal reflection, introspection. In fact, still have my blog post published, but I haven't really added to it. Um, Initially, I wrote about topics of art, culture, and literature. When I first came back to Manila after my stint as an international English educator, I was a writer and a blogger for food and events of the Cultural Center of the Philippines. I blogged about ballet, about art openings, and the like. Later on, I was tapped by political commentators, particularly from the Duterte camp, that they had noticed my writing and they need someone in their fold who can go toe to toe with people who are a little more well versed, a little more, shall we say, who write with a little more savoir faire, to write against people from the yellow camp. And so that's how it began.
All right, and as you said earlier, as you said, your style is more with the written word, and you pride yourself on being a wordsmith and essayist. Uh, in this age where a lot of political commentary online is usually video or stuff on the radio and quick clips on TikTok, what role do you think your writing and the written word has in Philippine political discourse moving forward? Like, where do you see your role as an essayist on Philippine politics?
Well, as a what do you call this? A communication strategist and public relations practitioner, you need to evolve with the changing media landscape. Videos are very integral to this. Even in teaching of international education, these new trends in writing is under the banner called new textualities, which do include memes, which do include catchphrases and other things, hashtagging. Those things fall under international education teaching of communications. So you must evolve. To that effect, to that end, I in fact dabbled a little into vlogging, particularly during the pandemic. I found that I enjoyed it as well, and I did gain a meager following, substantial, I guess, but it did reach the right people, which led to me participating in the 2022 campaigns, writing for several politicians. A friend of mine from the Marcos camp called me their Sunday guilty pleasure, watching my TikTok videos. But that for me that was show. I did do very short political commentaries there, but it felt like a theatrical presentation for me. I invested in clothing, I invested in costumes, I wore all of my mother's and grandmother's um what do you call this, estate jewelry. So it was a whole production. In fact, someone who saw my TikToks actually proposed a deal, which I did engage in, to produce a 13-part series on Facebook called Facts Not Feelings. So that was a fully produced show. It had a head writer, it had a producer, it had a videographer, an editor, a makeup team, a style team, wardrobe consultant, everything, the works. But the content was mine. It was all mine. So you do participate and evolve with the new realities in media and the trends. But as a marketing person as well, I fully subscribe to the idea that content is king. It is primordial. So whether it is written or visual, content is king. You must have something you want to say. And me, I'm of the belief that, it should be research based writing or content creation and context based understanding of the content. And I fully believe that.
You are clearly a veteran in the modern Philippine political scene. As you said, you were active with the Duterte camp, and then now you're active with the Marcos campaign. And we're now at the midpoint in the Marcos presidency. Things seems to have hit the crescendo. The midterms are coming, and like the tensions are flaring. Where do you see the current Philippine political landscape at the moment? Perhaps give us our listeners, many of which are overseas, maybe you can give us overview on where things stand. What's the overview of where we are in the Philippine political landscape at the moment?
Well, with all the fake news and with all the talk that is going around on social media and even on traditional media, the only point in time that I think we can fully understand where we are at would be exactly after the midterm elections. At that point, we will know, at least have a clearer view of how 2028 will take shape. Who gets elected, who does not, which party lines have more candidates in, how slim the margins are. All of those things will be clearer after the midterm elections. But where we're at right now can be seen from multiple lenses. From the Marcos administration, these are, small projects, short-term projects, all the long-term projects should have been what do you call this, should have been engaged, should have already been should already be at a stage where they are in mid implementation. So when we look at where we're at politically, we also need to see where we are economically, food security, national security, all of those things, our diplomacy, where we're at right now, which, I guess this will be something we will discuss at a later point in this interview. But diplomacy, I feel, is thriving and even made stronger by what just happened with President Duterte. Our our ability to what do you call this? To participate with and engage with the Interpol and the ICC is a very strong it's a clear message that we have we have a strong sense of integrity with regards to our diplomatic relationships. Also, if you look at it from the point of view of those people who are re-electionists, where we are politically, batasang pambansa, everyone there is will undergo either an exit from Batas ng Pambansa or be a re-electionist because the political lifespan there is 3 years. So every elections they undergo the election cycle. So that so when we look at it from that point of view, we will also understand um, what will happen to things that the country is eagerly waiting for, like the impeachment trial. Will the 11 appointed congressional prosecutors still be in Congress by the time the impeachment trial does begin. And also with that, we will also understand who gets elected into the Senate, who are part of the Magic 12. Will this favor an impeachment um, that will um, remove Sarah from office or keep her there, thereby give strengthening her chances for 2028? So there are many ways of looking at it. What does China play in this in our current political landscape? America, Trump, all of these things.
So a lot of people, what I've noticed is that all of a sudden, many Filipinos have suddenly gotten engaged in politics, who weren't as engaged in the last few years. And there's this real surprise among many ordinary Filipinos, and especially the OFWs, who's been cut off from a lot of the noise. They're surprised of the how very noisy, how very vitriolic things have gotten all of a sudden. And people are asking, how did we get to this point in Philippine politics? I mean, the former president is at the ICC. There's calls for insurrection among the military and police, quote unquote, or some people are trying to make it so. And then there's now open talks online and trying to get another EDSA to ask another Marcos. And basically, if you're an OFW in the United States right now, or you're just an ordinary guy who hasn't picked up the Philippine Star in ages, they're wondering how did we get here? Perhaps in your own words, you can explain like how did we get here?
How did we get here? Well, first off, I believe that the OFWs, oh no, not just the OFWs, but Filipinos in general, have always been political. It's just that social media has made everyone else more aware of where they stand politically. We are made more aware because, there are no more geographical boundaries, not even personal boundaries are respected on social media. We are force fed other people's beliefs. So we are more aware of other people's opinions. So um, with regards to how did we get here, well, the reality is for the Philippines, the past administration, Duterte really weaponized the internet. And I I I, I would like to think that I was part of that. I was part of that, well, up until late 2017, early 2018. I was there. I was with them. I drank the Kool-Aid. I believed in the idealism until reality set in, right? So, weaponizing the internet, um, making stars, making powerful political people more human, emboldening ordinary Filipinos to say where they stand. Make a stand, even if the stand is based on nothing but hearsay or fake news. There's a tragic beauty to that. Why? I personally, as a communicator, as an English language educator, I believe in the free exchange of ideas. In fact, I believe in the right to profanity. People should be able to express themselves in the best way they possibly can. Not everyone's educated. Not everyone knows how to communicate any better than using invectives, prevarications. So they should be allowed to express what they feel. But I'm also for social media self regulation. Why? Because when fake news becomes harmful to lives, to people, to livelihood, to national security, there should be limits. The freedom of expression is not absolute. There are, in fact, many instances for unprotected speech. And not just in Philippine laws, but international laws as well. So we got here because just like Bush, just like Trump, Duterte weaponized the internet, empowered ordinary Filipinos who were daring enough to create online personas, myself included, to become stars, the new celebrities. It was crazy how we were treated. Every time I would go to Davao during those days, people would ask for your autograph, take a picture with you. They would ask you to sign their shirts, things like that. Everyone knew everyone in the Duterte camp during that time. Social media was became so powerful that, and it was a conscious effort in Duterte's time. I remember attending PCOO events where mainstream media would be pushed to the back of the event venue, and social media content creators like myself, and some of the people who are being summoned by the Tricom hearing at the Tricom hearings were put on pedestals with proper tables, access to internet, access to, what do you call this, outlets, so that we could plug in our gadgets. We were really treated extra special. There really was a plan to weaken traditional media and empower social media, because everyone knew that, first, no one knew Duterte. No one favored Duterte, especially mainstream media. So he created his own. That's how that's why we are where we are right now.
I'm very taken with what you said earlier about how certain basic realities over time just set in, which explains why you've now repudiated a lot of what the Duterte admin has done, despite you being very honest about your work in the communication team. Um, for for many people, though, when the news of Duterte's arrest came, it would appear that they were very shocked about it. They didn't know the series of events which led up to this, and they weren't aware that in politics, the same with like science and gravity, you can't violate the laws of nature forever. And Duterte was basically that. He was, uh, if many people would say he was an aberration of the local Philippine political climate rather than the norm. And so, I mean, you've got the Duterte guys now, the Duterte camp crying about treason, saying that certain promises made in the 2022 unity was violated. I mean, if this is the case, perhaps you can explain to our listeners why, what led to Duterte to The Hague? What are the political and even legal realities that have slowly set in and are slowly recorrecting Philippine politics?
I've been watching, consuming so much content on YouTube regarding this. Interviews by political pundits, interviews by the lawyers from both sides, interviews by people who were central to this arrest and to his eventual transmission to The Hague. What I found most interesting, which we probably all assumed, but I've never really heard it spoken out loud, are are things, basic facts. First, this case was filed way back 2019 by Trillanes and Alejano. Nothing came of it until 8 years later, when he was finally arrested and then eventually brought to The Hague. What does that mean? People on the pro-China, pro-Duterte camp are insisting we have a fully functioning legal system, judiciary, branch of government. Why are we not trying him here first? Well, Secretary Boying Remulla said it best in his recent interview with Christian Esguerra. That was a last resort legal remedy. If there was indeed any any compunction from the Duterte camp to actually bring justice to the victims of their EJK victims, they should have done it 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022 even. But nothing was done. What made it worse was the revelation that Secretary Remulla said that once the Marcos administration came into power and he was appointed as the Secretary of Justice, they did attempt to look at the EJK cases. But the problem is, there was It was an institutionalized cover up. It was a massive, it was massive, and it was diabolical in that EJKs were happening, and through the Quadcom hearings, we realized that there was money coming from Pogo that became the bounty that police were receiving to commit EJKs because they had quotas. And then you realize that Duterte himself made Pogo legal to be able to have funds for the Oplantokang and his EJK bounties. And what made it worse, again, sorry I skipped to this part, but the revelation was that when Secretary Boying Remulla tried to look for the cases, not a single police, what do you call that? There were no
Records. 95% of them were
police
missing.
documents filed. 95%, yes. There was nothing. So it's systemic. It's institutionalized. Police are used to filing police reports. But all of a sudden, the entire nation stopped writing police reports. They were writing police reports prior to Duterte coming into office, coming into power. Suddenly, it stopped. And there would be instances where the causes of death written would be gunshot wounds to the head. If there was really any political will to bring this to justice, there is no evidence to it. Nothing, not a single action done would lead the ICC or even a person with the most cognitive processes or scaffolding for logical thought. No one would believe that they really, sincerely wanted to prosecute any of the people who are alleged murderers or part of the mass murder that is the EJK. Next, what led him to finally being getting to that night when he was arrested and we were all waiting for the airplane to leave Villamor Air Base was
Yeah.
was one of the longest nights of my life. I was so sleepy. I normally sleep very early, like 9 p.m. But I couldn't risk sleeping and finding out the following day that a TRO had been issued and Duterte is still in the country. And it wasn't just me. I heard from friends. It goes all the way up in the places of power in the Philippines. Everyone was biting their nails, waiting for that plane to take off. And when it finally did, I felt a sigh of relief, but I can only imagine what the actual families of the victims were feeling. That sense of catharsis, right? It was justice that they, I mean, honestly, did you, I keep telling people this, I couldn't actually believe that it happened. He was too big to fail. He was too big a fish to be caught.
It was
I
so
couldn't
quick.
believe that
It
it
was
actually
so
happened.
clean. It was so clean.
It was the only way I believed that it was going. Yeah, it was so quick and clean. Had it been any other way, this operation would have failed.
And we
If
heard
it had
stories.
been,
We heard stories of them like active attempts to try and TRO this to keep him in a certain facility. It wasn't just like people on the edge of their seats. Like the Republic was on the edge of their seats. If you believe a lot of the rumors of them of people planning mass instability in the capital to break the man out had he stayed.
and they were prepared for it. They were actually prepared. Why? They had a 94-page pleading prayer for a TRO ready by noon, which means it had been done days, weeks, even months prior. And if my sources are correct, some of the names mentioned there are no longer in those positions that they were written as in the pleading or in that prayer for TRO, which means that it had that document, that 94-page document, was prepared. a long time back. They knew it was coming, but it had, but General Torre did it so fast and so clean, and he stood his ground. And I can't wait for General Torre to be a senator in 2028.
Absolutely. And I guess on my follow up, very quick follow up to you is I've followed your content too for the last 2 years, and you seem to be a person very steeped in Philippine history and especially Filipino culture. We as a country pride ourselves at being naturally very God fearing and also very soft spoken and very tame when it comes to our attitudes. Lee Kuan Yew famously called us a very soft and forgiving people. So I go back to what I said earlier about Duterte being an aberration. How do you think millions of Filipinos up to this day still fall for this? Like how are they so enthralled with this to the point where you've got seditious statements now, you've got actual calls for defections now, you've got people pledging their lives to get the man out of the Hague. How did we get here? How did Filipino culture get so corrupted like this?
I don't think it's just Filipino culture. It just seems shocking to us because we did come so far from we did fall so far from where we were originally at. But I think that shift in values is not germane to the Philippines. I feel like it's the way America is, it's the way the UK is, it's the way the world is right now. And we live in a world without borders. We're mostly online. So people, this global culture, this is the new global culture. People do believe in fake news. People do believe that men give birth, that women can have a penis. This is the way the world is right now. Catholic churches in America are willing to actually accept that too. Things that go directly in contradiction to the basis of who they are as professionals. So, the world has shifted, and it's this is the world we live in. It's not just the Philippines.
Being a self-confessed Marcus
That's
loyalist,
my opinion on it.
sorry. Being a self-confessed Marcus loyalist, you say yourself and being active in politics. What sort of political? We've discussed the legal considerations, but what sort of political considerations do you think went into taking Duterte out of the Philippines, of surrendering him to the Hague? I mean, there's a lot of individuals right now who would claim that this was a purely political affair, and some individuals would claim no, this was purely apolitical, which is completely following the law. I guess it's somewhat in the middle. Well, what compelled the Marcos administration to do this, and what do you think they went into the decision making in those nail-biting 48 hours that we discussed?
Well, I cannot speak for the Marcoses, but I can only speak for myself. And first off, everything is political. There is nothing that isn't. Everything is political. Religion is political. Eating is political. Everything. I mean, literally everything is political. So that's first. Next, what what were the how do I say this without other Marcos loyalists hating me? Okay, the way that this was executed, this flawless transmission from the Philippines to the Hague of dictator Digong followed almost the exact same formula as how Marcos Sr. was exiled to Hawaii
Uh,
within days,
yes.
right? There was there was people power happening here. There was in fact a change of allegiances by the men in uniform, which did not happen in this case. But The razor play, how quick this played out, followed almost that exact same momentum. Even the people who are now running away as fugitives, it 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 savors strongly of that event in 1986.
No.
So I hope they don't hate me because they are nothing alike. The two men are nothing alike. But even though I hate Duterte very much for the things that he committed, I cannot remove the this from him that in fact the man is charismatic in a way probably that Hitler was as well. He's able to make people believe lies. He's able to convince people who are trained to defend the innocent, the weak, to actually murder them.
You
That's the kind, typical strong man. He carries all of those things, even the charm that comes with it, goes with it.
you
So,
mentioned
um,
the 1986 revolution and the way the Marcoses were driven out of power. Per, well, as we mentioned earlier, Rocky, there's this apparent heightened activity online and apparently also on the ground for destabilization attempts of trying to undermine the current Marcos administration. Talks of withdrawing of support from members of the police.
mm,
I mean, as a fan of history yourself, in your opinion, is this just noise or is there something more? Like, if there's smoke, is there fire taking place with what the increasingly violent rhetoric of the dictators are saying? Are we looking at the possible 1986 scenario again? Or are the Duterte, do the Duterte camp now
no,
lack the political capital to engage in such a thing?
simply the answer is no. It's not gonna happen. Why? Two things are missing for a repeat of 1986. The first and most critical of these things for any regime change to successfully happen through protest would be the shift in allegiance of our men in uniform. I want to share this. This is real, but this is a personal experience. I have friends who have been approached 2 or 3 days ago, confided in me that they are being recruited to join a rally for Friday, on Friday, this coming Friday. It's supposed to be civil unrest to bring back Duterte on his birthday, March 28th. So, but they admitted that they're also asking for support, financial support, and warm bodies. But they were quick to admit that the AFP and PNP were not joining. Because apparently the AFP and PNP are still solid pro administration, which is not a surprise given that in the past 2 weeks, many laws were passed to improve the military capabilities and also the military compensation packages. Therefore, it's not the money, but the awareness, the respect, and the validation that we see what they're doing and that government honors these men and their families for their sacrifice. Being that the AFP and PNP, admittedly, from the people who were recruiting my friends that the AFP and PNP were not joining. So the first critical element in a regime change through revolution is already out. Second, most of the rallies are, if as all of us are probably monitoring, are happening overseas. The problem there for them, for the Duterte followers, is that these people are bound by the local laws of the land where they're working or living or migrated to. They're beyond the jurisdiction of Philippine laws and do not have any actual real life application or effect on what is happening in the Philippines. They cannot gather a crowd in Luzon. The crowd that they gathered, that pitiful number of people that gathered in Cebu, Tagbilaran, and all of these other places, having to resort to edited pictures, claiming pictures from other events, are telltale signs that they are not able to muster enough support domestically, where the revolution will have to happen for there to be a regime change in the country. No matter how many people mount a rally in the Netherlands, in Japan, or wherever else, has no real world application here in the Philippines. So, to answer that question, no, I don't think there is any chance for 1980 for a repeat of 1986 to the current Marcos administration.
I think
There.
they just lacked a lot of the moral outrage which stirred up, rightly or wrongly, the last two EDSAs we had. It was moral outrage that brought people out in '86. It was moral outrage that brought people out against Erap Estrada. And the question is, will there? This is what they're banking on. They're banking on whether there's sufficient moral outrage to try and against what happened to Duterte. And apparently there isn't, because they don't have enough forces to camp out at the shrine, much less storm Menjola. So as we mentioned earlier, I guess
And
my brief follow up to that
what
is
what
that
moral
yes,
what moral high ground will they be standing on to defend what moral high ground will the Duterte followers be standing on to request for his release and return? What? To invalidate the 30,000 deaths? To deny justice to 30,000 people who were brutally murdered in a phony drug war? Where is the morality there? Morality does not, I mean, ethics or morals do not side with them, do not favor their cause. So who, what institution would support EJ case, would support injustice to victims, would support an idea that in fact makes a mockery out of our judicial system, being that it is extrajudicial, right?
no, absolutely. I don't think they will have the cardinal sin and Radio Veritas moment either. I mean, they're trying to replicate that with certain other smaller sects, but I don't think they'll have the large one in favor. I guess a brief follow up to that is just very quickly to summarize what we discussed. Uh, how stable is the Marcos administration, sir? And not just in terms of security, in terms of also on the political coalition that it's carrying over into the midterms. I mean, we see rumblings of perhaps a lot of the senators from the Nationalista Party wavering. We see some political scholars question, and even members of the Duterte camp saying that this will have consequences, etc., etc. The PDP guys will sweep come the midterms. Will this actually affect the Marcos coalition? Well, how stable is it going to the midterms?
You know, the whole idea of the alyansa ng bagong Pilipinas has always been a very difficult proposition because so many of the people who are part of it do not easily form form a conscious, how shall I put this?
There's no
They do not
ideological bedrock.
naturally come together. There are no, there, it doesn't even seem that there is any rhyme or reason to why anyone would vote for all of them, except just a general belief in what in what President Marcos is saying to please vote for the 11. But the problem is, any thinking loyalista would not vote for certain people who we know to be anti-Marcos. Because it is so easy to identify the people who are out and out anti-Bongbong Marcos in that slate. So to think that most of the pro-admin the admin supporters, um, the voters who are pro-admin will naturally vote for the entire Alianza lineup has always been, yeah, challenging to say the least. Challenging to imagine that we would vote straight. I won't. It was never I never even considered it. Because there are people there that my body has an actual physical reaction to. Every time I would think, I will vote for this person, I cannot condemn my vote that way. There is a certain sanctity and dignity to the right to suffrage that I will not sacrifice just because someone tells me to vote for someone who I passionately dislike or disagree with. So I don't think that it should be a barometer for how 2028 will shape up. Why? Um, I've been discussing this with um, people who I work with, and we have been calling a list of people that will that are not in the Alianza ticket, but will be critical players in voting during the impeachment trial. People from the opposition who will probably indict Sara Duterte were important as senator judges for the at the impeachment trial. So I will be voting for those people. So to assume that that the 11 that President Marcos is campaigning for do not get elected does not necessarily say that he's lost political capital for 2028.
As we go to the second half of our interview, and thank you so much once again for joining us here at SitrepPH. We will talk about a lot of the other things that happened last week in the aftermath of the Duterte arrest, specifically about the fake news. Well, before we go to the fake news hearings, I guess very briefly, we can talk about the Imee Marcos hearings with the House Committee on Foreign Relations in the Senate. I mean, I, from my perspective, they really didn't get nothing from that hearing, and if anything, the Marcos admin got very good sound bites out of the Remulla brothers. Was Senator Marcos and by extension Senator Cayetano, were they just on a fishing expedition to see what they can dig up, and did they really bring up any relevant issues that will resonate and will really harm the Marcos admin, in your opinion, sir?
I don't enjoy watching the Senate hearings the same way I used to enjoy watching them during the time when Miriam Defensor was still part of the Senate or Juan Ponce Enrile was still part of the Senate. The few hearings that I did watch all seemed like they were fishing expeditions. The one with Kibuloy, the one about Kibuloy, the one about Duterte, the one where they were trying to to investigate Alice Guo the same way, the parallel committee hearing in the Senate to the Quadcom didn't really seem prepared the same way the houses of the Quadcom was handled. So it always seems to me that Senate hearings are more for grandstanding, more for the exposure. Senators who are pro Duterte, I don't think they really gained much. They were not able to establish the point from the representatives of Malacanang. Some of my key takeaways from that is that General Torre, we are lucky to have General Torre in the administration, that he is also fit to be senator. There is something senatorial about him, the way he answers, how decisive he is, how brilliant he is with his responses, his logical thought, um, his adherence to the law, that the Secretary of Justice knows the law like his own children, and that everything that transpired with the arrest of Duterte followed local laws. So that was, at first I didn't want to watch it until someone had been importuning me with details of it that I just had to watch it myself, and I was so surprised it was not the carnivalia that I thought it was. It was in fact interesting and funny and insightful. What I think this can be our transition to that final topic you wanted, is that what I realized from that also is that the senators themselves believed in the propaganda, believed in the lie, believed in the fake news when when they were made to realize that none of Duterte's rights were violated, specifically with regards to the one that they were claiming he was not given access to his own doctors, when in fact the arresting team went out of their way over and beyond what is normally given to people during an arrest. Was very telling. It was very revealing that fake news does affect everyone, and that people who are not media literate are easily victims of fake news as well. And senators are not exempt from that.
This is sadly a criticism of the current version of the Philippine Senate, that people would compare it to the soaring rhetoric that you would have from Angara, from Rene Cayetano, from Laurel, and from your Defensor Santiago, Raul Rocco back in the 90s and 2000s. And it used to be the House was the Peria, the House was the Carnival Circus, and the Senate was where people would go
Mm.
to for roaring rhetoric and for high ideologies, and it would seem that the roles were reversed. So going to the House, we have got the hearings going on when it comes to fake news. Last week we've had a flurry of hearings on fake news and whether it's true or what is true, what is not true. We saw a very emotional Ethel Pineda present Loretta Chu and Mary Jean Reyes, and the rest of the individuals grilled for fake news and disinformation. I mean, what are your reactions to the scenes that we saw in the House, and what does that say about the current information landscape in the country? A lot of these people, as you mentioned, used to them, and now you've got individuals accused not only of of attempting spreading fake news when it comes to national security. They're actively repeating Chinese talking points. How does that make you feel?
I feel a sense of betrayal because I always when I was part of the Duterte bloggers, I believed it when they told me that we are fighting for the country. We are fighting for our sovereignty. That's why I believed that, some deaths are acceptable, but come on, 6,000, 30,000, that's just unacceptable. I believed them when they told me before that this was for the Philippines. But hearing now, seeing how far they've gone from that, and it's so it's so easy to identify, to pick out all of those narratives that are woven into their daily content, spreading Chinese propaganda it's heartbreaking. And what made it all the more obvious was is again the difference between Senate and Congress is that during the Tricom hearings, or any hearings for that matter, subject matter specialist congressmen would sit and take the helm of the question and answer. So it was so easy to pick apart people who came with nothing but arrogance and no real data to back up their claims on social media. It was so easy to eviscerate all of these bloggers who were finally forced to admit that they do spread fake news, because that really is the case. They had no facts to back up all their claims. So there.
Perhaps we can.
That's how I feel about them. And that they
Yes.
were crying is, I mean, yeah. And I don't think it was because that they felt scared. It seemed, if you were there in the room, it seemed more like out of frustration because they wanted to lash out, but they couldn't. They wanted to talk back and be biting and a little more acerbic, but they couldn't. It felt like they were just They just lost power, and that's why they're crying out of anger, not really out of a sense of realization or contrition, nothing like that.
When it comes to foreign propaganda actively trying to both spread Chinese talking points and critically wound the Marcos administration that's already been recorded, you've got articles from Fulcrum in the Australia, you've got articles from the International Institute of Strategic Studies. There's clearly foreign actors trying to influence Philippine politics for geopolitical gain. And I mean, you see also a flurry of bots, of fake news, and harassment campaigns, social media to set the narratives of the West Philippine Sea and to try and undermine the views of the administration. Have you seen any of these? Are you familiar with them on a regular basis? And do you think to yourself as a active blogger that they're effective, or are they not effective? Are they a very crude way of engaging in propaganda?
Yes, I see them. I see them quite frequently. They appear on my news feed. There are many lines. Close attention. I don't know if anyone picked it up, but this was this was a narrative that was used by the Chinese in 20, I want to say 2022. 2022. It died down, and I heard Mark Lopez mention this again. Pay close attention to people who will claim that the acts of harassment, incursions in the West Philippine Sea, it's not only the Chinese. Pay close attention to people who will say Vietnam does it all the time. Vietnam also attacks the Philippines. But that is true. Vietnam does attack us. But that is taking away from what the Chinese are doing to us, to the harassment that our fishermen are feeling, to all their battleships, to all their man made islands. That is a line of narrative that we also have to watch out for. People who will push for the Vietnamese narrative. Why Vietnam? Who is Vietnam closely associated to? America. They have a shared history. So that is a line of narrative that the Chinese propaganda machines were using. It died down a bit, and I just heard Mark Lopez mention it again during the recent Tricomm hearing. So be careful of that.
We have a series of questions from political commentator Gamer, Political Attack Big on Twitter. Gamer, do you want, welcome to SitrepPH. Do you want to ask some questions?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ivan. Hello, Cocky Rocky. So,
Hi, gamer.
hi. So, this is not actually the first time that we wanted to see their bloggers to be asked during the legislative hearing. So, when you saw them, what were you thinking? Let's not get into emotional because just like Chrisette said, yung gumagawa siya ng article based on her emotions. But what were you feeling during that time? Because they didn't show up the first time, right? The invitation, they tried not to go there. Then when they finally showed up there, were you expecting something to hear from them? Were you expecting them to like do a drama? Just what we expected, what happened really?
Well, for me personally, it was very emotional for me seeing them there. I knew all of them. I knew all of them personally. I'm not in good terms with all of them. In fact, had a very short but nasty exchange with two of them. I will tell you, well, Viasa can tell you what the exchange was in the backstage, but something I'd rather not say and put into the record for Sitrep, but it was very emotional for me, and they were they were they were strutting in. They were strutting in like peacocks. So for Congressman Abante, Congressman Jude Asidre, even Congresswoman Geraldine Roman, to have actually brought them to their knees with facts, with simple questions like who is your source? Who are these people that you're mentioning here? What is your basis for saying these things? And they're clutching at nothing, at straws, because there was no basis for claims, wild claims made on social media. So it felt that way, to use another Greek Greek play terminology. It's called peripeteia, which is a change in fortune of a tragic hero, from a fall from grace, so to speak. To see that transformation from that huffy and puffy character that came in to someone who was sobbing hysterically into the microphone. And notice it was done into the microphone. They could have turned it off. They could have backed away from them. It was done on record. It was they in fact were cried into the microphones. Will makes you ask why, right? Begs the question, why cry into the microphone? So it was very emotional for me, but it was also a revelation that people are watching, people are trying to make sense of these things, and people are actually believing the fake news, which is what makes it very potentially dangerous. You're able to rally people remotely without of the things that you post, the things that you say. So it's quite dangerous. And it was quite satisfying to realize that there is a way forward. Congresswoman Geraldine Roman proposed a self-regulating body, which I actually also discussed many years ago with the PCO. So it was very emotional for me as a spectator to the things that unfolded the other day.
Gabe, you got another
Yes. What's
question?
your next
Yeah.
question?
One last question. So you saw Ethel Pineda started crying before the start of the legislative hearing. You heard Grisette say sorry. You also heard MJ admitted that she's tanga, and eventually Mark Lopez tried to lie on his teeth after everyone heard him that Philippines are water canoeing China. So can you try to describe what you were thinking during those times? Like probably in a simple sentence, siguro.
Simple sentence.
Mm.
Finally, the DDS tell the truth, are telling the truth.
Christ, that's nice.
Very succinct. I guess we're down to our last two questions on my part, sir. Many people would be asking, listen to this, why is it only now that this sort of comeuppance is coming to these individuals? I was hearing Professor Haydarian a while ago in his podcast talking about how the well has been poisoned. The marketplace of ideas in this country has been just completely corrupted by individuals, and that's something that was repeated by other individuals from the liberal camp. So they're asking why is it only now that this sort of restitution, this sort of justice is being given to individuals that has so poisoned the well. And perhaps as an individual active in politics yourself, you can explain why is it only coming now, and what more is coming to these sorts of fake news peddlers and social media trolls.
For me, since I was in the previous administration, I was active in the previous administration, and I'm still active now. It's simple. We are no longer under the dictatorship of Digong.
I see.
Free speech is back. Sobriety is back. Sanity is back. Values are back. Culture is back. Ethics is back. Things that were absent in the previous administrations found its way back. Justice is finally back. The police are actually fighting for the weak, the vulnerable. They are no longer the bullies that would torment, taunt, and even murder the innocent and the weak. That's why. That's why these things are only happening now. And yes, all the way up to his last day in office, they were actually up until now. The people who are what do you call this? Who are pouring ink into the well are still doing it. Are still spreading fake news. Are still lying. Are still trying to lie and just, patch it up with words like "thou, thou, thou." And they're, these weak-willed, easily manipulated band of follower, their easily manipulated band of followers will, lap it all up. Believe whatever lie that their favorite DDS blogger or vlogger would say. Imagine an entire media network that tells nothing but lies, that red tags individuals. Imagine that. And only also happened during Duterte's administration. Why are these things only happening now? Why is justice finally back? Why are people finally identifying fake news? And why is mainstream media, who in fact, is a mix. There are of course also biased media, but there are also, you know, centrist mainstream media who just reports the news. Because even back then, even when I was part of that machinery demonizing traditional media, we would still quote them. Why? Because we know intrinsically that mainstream media is, in fact, an authoritative source of information. They actually have eyes on the ground. Whereas we are nowhere near the ground. We're, in some climate controlled room connected to the internet, and that's about it. That's our access or our interaction with data. We have no first-hand knowledge of these things. But mainstream media does.
And,
So that's why it's only happening now because we're no longer under the yoke of the dictatorship.
and I guess as we wrap up, sir, do you've got any last words and sentiments to our listeners and, on the topic as the Philippines enters into the midterms and goes into what will be expected to be a very messy impeachment hearing?
Which to begin with is very interesting because midterms by design shouldn't be this way. It shouldn't be this exciting. It shouldn't be this polarized. Normally voter turnout is low. Propaganda and campaigning is very low, kept at a minimum because people are actually saving for the big one, which is the presidential race in 2028. So it's very interesting the way things are happening, the way um, a senatorial re-electionist is campaigning heavily against herself by condemning her brother is very interesting. What's important to remember is that now that we do have access to real news, to truth, we should capitalize on that. We should form opinions, make choices informed by the truth, by data, backed by
Thank
data.
you for
So, you
yes.
know,
Oh, okay.
research is important.
Perfect. The Cocky Rocky, thank you for being a guest on SitrepPH. Where can people find you if they want to discover more of your work? Do you've got any major stuff coming along? Do you want to plug your social media accounts?
Well, I normally just post my thoughts on the Cocky Rocky on Facebook or X or TikTok. I do have other accounts, but that's my main account. Um, Sometimes I do give talks to universities and the like, but nothing is nothing is planned for the next few weeks because, as we all know, elections and campaigning is very time consuming, and we are helping out with some people who are running, and we are also monitoring um, what is happening in the political landscape of the Philippines. So we're a little busy with that for now. But as soon as anything, normally I do post it on my Facebook page if there are any upcoming events that I am involved with.
Thank you so much.
That's where they will know when I have something new.
Thank you so much, sir. And this has been SitrepPH, the podcast on Philippine affairs and Filipino interests. This has been Ivan at home coming to you from Manila. Be sure to like our social media handles for more updates on our upcoming podcasts and access to our old episodes. We are at SitrepPH on X and on YouTube. Like us on Facebook also at facebook.com/Sitrep. Philippines, thank you and good night. Mabu.